presidential election, Republican candidate Donald Trump's activities in Russia and compromising relationship with the Kremlin. Summary: Russian regime has been cultivating, supporting and assisting Trump for at least 5 years. Aim endorsed by Putin has been to encourage splits and divisions in Western alliance. So far, Trump has declined various sweetener real estate business deals offered him in Russia in order to further the Kremlin's cultivation of him. However, he and his inner circle have accepted a regular flow of intelligence from the Kremlin, including on his Democratic and other political rivals. Former top Russian intelligence officer claims FSB has compromised Trump through his activities in Moscow sufficiently to be able to blackmail him. According to several knowledgeable sources, his conduct in Moscow has included perverted sexual acts which have been arranged, monitored by the FSB. A dossier of compromising material on Hillary Clinton has been collated by the Russian intelligence services over many years and mainly comprises bugged conversations she had on various visits to Russia and intercepted phone calls rather than any embarrassing conduct. The dossier is controlled by Kremlin spokesman Peskov directly on Putin's orders. However, it has not as yet been distributed abroad, including to Trump. Russian intentions for its deployment still unclear. Detail: 1. Speaking to a trusted compatriot in June 2016, sources A and B, a senior Russian Foreign Ministry figure and a former top-level Russian intelligence officer still active inside the Kremlin respectively, the Russian authorities had been cultivating and supporting U.S. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump for at least 5 years. Source B asserted that the Trump operation was both supported and directed by Russian President Vladimir Putin. Its aim was to sow discord and confidential sensitive source. Confidential sensitive source. KRTH within the U.S. itself, but more especially within the D-SUN, both WHN, which was viewed as inimical to Russia's interests. BSSE Financial Metal said Th. Trump operation sold to senior nine of Putin's desire to return to 19th Ronian of great power politics anchored upon country's interests. Ran the ideals-based international order established after War II. He had overheard Putin tell RIHG in this way in Dos Associates on several occasions. In terms of specifics, Source A confided that the Kremlin had been feeding Trump and his team valuable intelligence on his opponents, including Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, for several years. More below. This was confirmed by Source D, a close associate of Trump who had organized and managed his recent trips to who reported, also in June 2016, that this Russian >NDM trademark very helpful. The Kremlin's cultivation operation on one rump also comprised offering him various lucrative real estate development business deals in Russia, especially in relation to the Yongji Cup soccer tournament. However, so far, for reasons unknown, TR had not taken up any of these. 3. However, there were other aspects to Trump's engagement with the Russian authorities. One which had borne fruit for them was to exploit Trump's personal obsessions and sexual perversion in order to obtain suitable compromising material on him. According to Source D, whereas he had been present, Trump's perverted conduct in Moscow included hiring the presidential suite of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, where he knew President and Mrs. Obama, whom he hated, had stayed on one of their official trips to Russia, and defiling the bed where they had slept by employing a number of prostitutes to perform at golden showers urination show in front of him. The hotel was known to be under FSB control with microphones and concealed cameras in all the main rooms, to record anything they wanted to. 4. The Moscow Ritz, who said that he and several of the staff were aware of it at the time, and subsequently, he believed it had happened in 2013. SOUICEE provided an introduction for a company ethnic Russian operative to source a female staffer at the hotel when Trump had stayed there, who also confirmed the story. Speaking separately in June 2016, Source B, the former top-level Russian intelligence officer, asserted that Trump's unorthodox behavior in Russia over the years had provided the authorities there with enough embarrassing material on the now Republican presidential candidate to be able to blackmail him if they so wished. 5. Asked about the Kremlin's reported intelligence feed to Trump over recent years and rumors about a Russian dossier of compromise on confidential, sensitive source. Confidential, sensitive source. Milav Clinton F. being circulated. Source B confirmed the files. XTTNCES trademark confided in a trusted compatriot that it had been collated by Department K of the FSB for many years, dating back HCR husband Bill's presidency, and comprised mainly eavesdropped conversations of various sorts rather than details, evidence of unorthodox or embarrassing behavior. Some of the conversations were comments Clinton had made on her various trips to Russia and on things she had said which contradicted her current position on Vano issues. Others were most probably from phone intercepts. 6. Continuing on this theme, Source G, a senior Kremlin official, confided that the Clinton dossier was controlled exclusively by Chief Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, who was responsible for compiling, handling it on the explicit instructions of Putin himself. T. Dossier, however, had not as yet been made available abroad, eluding Trump or his campaign team. At present it was unclear what Bush's intentions were in this regard. The 20th of June 2016. Confidential, sensitive source. Confidential, sensitive source. Company Intelligence Report 2016-086. Russia, Cybercrime, a synopsis of Russian state-sponsored and other cyber-offensive criminal operations. Summary. Russia has extensive program of state-sponsored offensive less than 3* operations. External targets include foreign governments and MG corporations, especially banks. FSB leads on cyber in RA apparatus. Limited success in attacking top foreign targets like G7 governments, security services and IFIs, but much more on second ones through IT backdoors, using corporate and other Visito. FSB often uses coercion and blackmail to recruit MOSTCAPABLE cyber operatives in Russia into its state-sponsored programs. Heavy, both wittingly and unwittingly, of cis emigres working in Western corporations and ethnic Russians employed by neighboring governments e.g. Latvia. Example cited of successful Russian cyber operation targeting senior Western business visitor. Provided backdoor into important CERN institutions. Example given of U.S. citizen of Russian origin approached by FSB and offered incentive of investment in his business when visiting Moscow. Problems, however, for Russian authorities themselves encountering local hackers and cyber criminals operating outside state control. Central Bank claims there were over 20 serious attacks on correspondent accounts held by CBR in 2015, comprising rubles several billion in fraud. Some details given of leading non-state Russian cybercriminal groups. Details. 1. Speaking in June 2016, a number of Russian figures with a detailed knowledge of national cybercrime, both state-sponsored and otherwise, outlined the current situation in this area. A former senior intelligence officer divided Russian state-sponsored offensive cyber operations into 4 categories in order of priority, targeting foreign, especially confidential, sensitive source, confidential, sensitive source, Western governments, penetrating leading foreign business corporations, especially banks, domestic monitoring of the elite, and attacking political opponents both at home and abroad. The former intelligence officer reported that the Federal Security Service (FSB) was the lead organization within the Russian state apparatus for cyber operations. 2. In terms of the success of Russian offensive cyber operations to date, a senior government figure reported that there had been only limited success in penetrating the first-tier foreign targets. These comprised Western, especially G7 and NATO governments, security and intelligence services and central banks, and the IFLs. To compensate for this shortfall, massive effort had been invested, with much greater success, in attacking the secondary targets, particularly Western private banks and the governments of smaller states allied to the West. He mentioned Latvia. In this regard, hundreds of agents, either consciously cooperating with the FSB or whose personal and professional IT systems had been unwittingly compromised, were recruited. Many were people who had ethnic and family ties to Russia or had been incentivized financially to cooperate. Such people often would receive monetary inducements or contractual favors from the Russian state or its agents in return. This had created difficulties for parts of the Russian state apparatus in indulging them, e.g., the Central Bank of Russia knowingly having to cover up for such agents' money laundering operations through the Russian financial system. 3. In terms of the FSB's recruitment of capable cyber operatives to carry out its ideally deniable offensive cyber operations, a Russian IT specialist with direct knowledge reported in June 2016 that this was often done using coercion and blackmail. In terms of foreign agents, the FSB was approaching U.S. citizens of Russian Jewish origin on business trips to Russia. In one case, a U.S. citizen of Russian ethnicity had been visiting Moscow to attract investors in his new information technology program. The FSB clearly knew this and had offered to provide seed capital to this person in return for them being able to access and modify his IP with a view to targeting priority foreign targets by planting a Trojan virus in the software. The U.S. visitor was told this was common practice. The FSB also had implied significant operational success as a result of installing cheap Russian IT games containing their own malware unwittingly by targets on their PCs and other platforms. 4. In a more advanced and successful FSB operation, an IT operator insider leading Russian SOE, who previously had been employed on conventional defensive IT work there, had been under instruction for the last year to conduct an offensive cyber operation against a foreign director of the company. Although the latter was apparently an infrequent visitor to Russia, the FSB now successfully had penetrated his personal IT and through this had managed to access various important institutions in the West through the back door. Confidential, sensitive source. 5. Confidential, sensitive source. 5. In terms of other technical IT platforms, an FSB cyber operative flagged up the Telegram enciphered commercial system as having been of a special concern and therefore heavily targeted by the FSB, not least because it was used frequently by Russian internal political activists and oppositionists. Her understanding was that the FSB now successfully had cracked this communications software and therefore it was no longer secure to use. 6. The senior Russian government figure cited above also reported that non-state-sponsored cybercrime was becoming an increasing problem inside Russia for the government and authorities there. The central bank of Russia claimed that in 2015 alone there had been more than 20 attempts at serious cyber embezzlement of money from corresponding accounts held there, comprising several billions rubles. More generally, he understood there were circa 15 major organized crime groups in the country involved in cybercrime, all of which continued to operate largely outside state and FSB control. These included the so-called Unedited, Booktrap and Metal organizations. The 26th of July 2015. Confidential, sensitive source. 4. Company Intelligence Report 2016-095. Russia, U.S. presidential election. Further indications of extensive conspiracy between Trump's campaign team and the Kremlin. Summary. Further evidence of extensive conspiracy between Trump's campaign team and Kremlin, sanctioned at highest levels and involving Russian diplomatic staff based in the U.S. Trump associate admits Kremlin behind recent appearance of DNC mails on WikiLeaks as means of maintaining plausible deniability. Agreed exchange of information established in both directions. Trump's team using moles within DNC and hackers in the U.S. as well as outside in Russia. Putin motivated by fear and hatred of Hillary Clinton. Russians receiving intel from Trump's team on Russian oligarchs and their families in U.S. Mechanism for transmitting this intelligence involves pension disbursements to Russian émigrés living in U.S. as cover, using consular officials in New York, D.C. and Miami. Suggestion from source close to Trump and AMANAFORT that Republican campaign team happy to have Russia as media bogeyman to mask more extensive corrupt business ties to China and other emerging countries. Detail. 1. Speaking in confidence to a compatriot in late July 2016, source an ethnic Russian close associate of Republican U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump admitted that there was a well-developed conspiracy of cooperation between him and the Russian leadership. This was managed on the Trump side by the Republican candidate's campaign manager Paul Manafort, who was using foreign policy advisor Carter Page and others as intermediaries. The two sides had a mutual interest in defeating Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, whom President Putin apparently both hated and feared. 2. Inter alia, source acknowledged that the Russian regime had been behind the recent leak of embarrassing email messages emanating from the Democratic National Committee (DNC) to the WikiLeaks platform. Confidential, sensitive source. Confidential, sensitive source. The reason for using WikiLeaks was plausible deniability, and the operation had been conducted with the full knowledge and support of Trump and senior members of his campaign team. In return, the Trump team had agreed to sideline Russian intervention in Ukraine as a campaign issue and to raise U.S.-NATO defense commitments in the Baltics and Eastern Europe to deflect attention away from Ukraine, a priority for Putin, who needed to cauterize the subject. In the wider context of Trump campaign, Kremlin cooperation, source claimed that the intelligence network being used against Clinton comprised three elements. Firstly, there were agents, facilitators within the Democratic Party structure itself. Secondly, Russian émigré and associated offensive cyber operators based in the U.S. And thirdly, state sponsored cyber operatives working in Russia. All three elements had played an important role to date on the mechanism for rewarding relevant assets based in the US and affecting a two-way flow of intelligence and other useful information. Dossier claimed that Russian diplomatic staff in key cities such as New York, Washington, D.C. and Miami were using the émigré pension distribution system as cover. The operation therefore depended on key people in the U.S.-Russian émigré community for its success. Tens of thousands of dollars were involved in terms of the intelligence flow from the Trump team to Russia. Source E reported that much of this concerned the activities of business oligarchs and the family's activities and assets in the U.S. with which Putin and the Kremlin seemed preoccupied. Commenting on the negative media publicity surrounding alleged Russian interference in the U.S. election campaign in support of Trump, Dossier said he understood that the Republican candidate and his team were relatively relaxed about this because it deflected media and the Democrats' attention away from Trump's business dealings in China and other emerging markets. Unlike in Russia, these were substantial and involved the payment of large bribes and kickbacks which, were they to become public, would be potentially very damaging to the campaign. Finally, regarding Trump's claimed minimal investment profile in Russia, a separate source with direct knowledge said this had not been for want of trying. Trump's previous efforts had included exploring the real estate sector in St. Petersburg as well as Moscow, but in the end Trump had to settle for the use of extensive sexual services there from local prostitutes rather than business success. Confidential, sensitive source. Company Intelligence Report 2016-94. Russia. Secret Kremlin meetings attended by Trump advisor Carter Page in Moscow, July 2016. Summary. Trump advisor Carter Page holds secret meetings in Moscow with SECHIN and senior Kremlin internal affairs official DIVYEKIN. SECHIN raises issues of future bilateral U.S.-Russia energy cooperation and associated lifting of Western sanctions against Russia over Ukraine. Page non-committal in response. DIVEYKIN discusses release of Russian dossier of compromat on Trump's opponent, Hillary Clinton, but also hints at Kremlin possession of such material on Trump. Detail. 1. Speaking in July 2016, a Russian source close to Rosneft President Putin, close associate and U.S.-sanctioned individual Igor Sechin, confided the details of a recent secret meeting between him and visiting foreign affairs advisor to Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump. Carter Page. 2. According to SECHIN's associate, the Rosneft president CEO had raised with Page the issues of future bilateral energy cooperation and prospects for an associated move to lift Ukraine-related Western sanctions against Russia. Page had reacted positively to this démarche by SECHIN but had been generally non-committal in response. 3. Speaking separately, also in July 2016, an official close to presidential administration head S. Ivanov confided in a compatriot that a senior colleague in the internal political department of the PA DIVYEKIN NFD also had met secretly with Page on his recent visit. Their agenda had included DIVEYKIN raising a dossier of compromat the Kremlin possessed on Trump's Democratic presidential rival, Hillary Clinton, and its possible release to the Republicans' campaign team. 4. However, the Kremlin official close to S. Ivanov added that he believed DIVEYKIN also had hinted, or indicated more strongly, that the Russian leadership also had compromat on Trump which the latter should bear in mind in his dealings with them. 19th of July 2016. Company Intelligence Report 2016-097. Russia-US presidential election. Kremlin concern that political fallout from DNC email hacking affair spiraling out of control. Summary. Kremlin concerned that political fallout from DNC email hacking operation is spiraling out of control. Extreme nervousness among Trump's associates as a result of negative media attention, accusations. Russians meanwhile keen to cool situation and maintain plausible deniability of existing, ongoing pro-Trump and anti-Clinton operations. Therefore unlikely to be any ratcheting up offensive plays in immediate future. Source close to Trump campaign, however, confirms regular exchange with Kremlin has existed for at least 8 years, including intelligence fed back to Russia on oligarchs' activities in U.S. Russians apparently have promised not to use compromat they hold on Trump as leverage, given high levels of voluntary cooperation forthcoming from his team. Detail. 1. Speaking in confidence to a trusted associate in late July 2016, a Russian émigré figure close to the Republican U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump's campaign team commented on the fallout from publicity surrounding the Democratic National Committee DNC email hacking scandal. The émigré said there was a high level of anxiety within the Trump team as a result of various accusations leveled against them and indications from the Kremlin that President Putin and others in the leadership thought things had gone too far now and risked spiraling out of control. 2. Continuing on this theme, the émigré associate of Trump opined that the Kremlin wanted the situation to calm but for plausible deniability to be maintained concerning its extensive pro-Trump and anti-Clinton operations. He therefore judged that it was unlikely these would be ratcheted up, at least for the time being. 3. However, in terms of established operational liaison between the Trump team and the Kremlin, the émigré confirmed that an intelligence exchange had been running between them for at least 8 years. Within this context, Putin's priority requirement had been for intelligence on the activities, business and otherwise, in the U.S. of leading Russian oligarchs and their families. Trump and his associates duly had obtained and supplied the Kremlin with this information. 4. Finally, the émigré said he understood the Kremlin had more intelligence on Clinton and her campaign, but he did not know the details or when or it would be released as far as compromising information on TRUM concerned. Although there was plenty of this, he understood the Kremlin had word that it would not be deployed against the Republican president given how helpful and cooperative his team had been over several particularly of late. 30th of July 2016. Company Intelligence Report 2016-100. Russia, USA, growing backlash in Kremlin to DNC hacking and Trump's support operations. Summary. Head of PA Ivanov laments Russian intervention in U.S. presidential election and black PR against Clinton and the DNC. Vows not to supply intelligence to Kremlin PR operatives again. Advocates now sitting tight and denying everything. Presidential spokesman Peskov, the main protagonist in Kremlin campaign to aid Trump and damage Clinton. He is now scared and fears being made scapegoat by leadership for backlash in U.S. problem, compounded by his botched intervention in recent Turkish crisis. Premier Medvedev's office furious over DNC hacking and associated anti-Russian publicity. Want good relations with the U.S. and ability to travel there. Refusing to support or help cover up after Peskov. Talk now in Kremlin of Trump withdrawing from presidential race. altogether, but this still largely wishful thinking by more liberal elements in Moscow. Detail 1. Speaking in early August 2016 to well-placed and established Kremlin sources outlined the divisions and backlash in Moscow arising from the leaking of Democratic National Committee (DNC) emails and the wider pro-Trump operation being conducted in the U.S. Head of Presidential Administration, Sergei Ivanov, was angry at the recent turn of events. He believed the Kremlin team involved, led by presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov, had gone too far in interfering in foreign affairs with their elephant in a china shop black PR. Ivanov claimed always to have opposed the handling and exploitation of intelligence by this PR team. Following the backlash against such foreign interference in U.S. politics, Ivanov was advocating that the only sensible course of action now for the Russian leadership was to sit tight and deny everything. 2. Continuing on this theme, the source close to Ivanov reported that Peskov now was scared shitless that he would be scapegoated by Putin and the Kremlin and held responsible for the backlash against Russian political interference in the U.S. election. Ivanov was determined to stop Peskov playing an independent role in relation to the U.S. going forward, and the source fully expected the presidential spokesman now to lay low. Peskov's position was not helped by a botched attempt by him also to interfere in the recent failed coup in Turkey from a government relations GR perspective. No further details. 3. The extent of disquiet and division within Moscow caused by the backlash against Russian interference in the U.S. election was underlined by a second source close to Premier Dmitry Medvedev. He said the Russian Prime Minister and his colleagues wanted to have good relations with the U.S. regardless of who was in power there, and not least so as to be able to travel there in future, either officially or privately. They were openly refusing to cover up for Peskov and others involved in the DNC Trump operations or to support his counterattack of allegations against the USG for its alleged hacking of the Russian government and state agencies. 4. According to the first source close to Ivanov, there had been talk in the Kremlin of Trump being forced to withdraw from the presidential race altogether as a result of recent events, ostensibly on grounds of his psychological state and unsuitability for high office. This might not be so bad for Russia in the circumstances, but in the view of the source, it remained largely wishful thinking on the part of those in the regime opposed to Peskov and his botched operations, at least for the time being. 5 August 2016. Company Intelligence Report 2016 101st. Russia, U.S. presidential election, senior Kremlin figure outlines evolving Russian tactics in pro-Trump, anti-Clinton operation. Summary. Head of PA Ivanov assesses Kremlin intervention in U.S. presidential election and outlines leadership thinking on operational way forward. No new leaks envisaged as too politically risky, but rather further exploitation of WikiLeaks material already disseminated to exacerbate divisions. Educated U.S. youth to be targeted as protest against Clinton and swing vote in attempt to turn them over to Trump. Russian leadership, including Putin, celebrating perceived success to date in splitting U.S. hawks and elite. Kremlin engaging with several high-profile U.S. players, including Stein, Page and a former DLA director, Michael Flynn, and funding their recent visits to Moscow. Details. 1. Speaking in confidence to a close colleague in early August 2016, head of the Russian presidential administration (PA), Sergei Ivanov, assessed the impact and results of Kremlin intervention in the U.S. presidential election to date. Although most commentators believed that the Kremlin was behind the leaked DNC Clinton emails, this remained technically deniable. Therefore, the Russians would not risk the position for the time being with new leaked material, even to a third party like WikiLeaks. Rather, the tactics would be to spread rumors and misinformation about the content of what already had been leaked and make up new content. 2. Continuing on this theme, Ivanov said that the audience to be targeted by such operations was the educated youth in America, as the PASS that there was still a chance that they could be persuaded to vote for Republican candidate Donald Trump as a protest against the Washington establishment in the form of Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton. The hope was that even if she won as a result of this, Clinton in power would be bogged down in working for internal reconciliation in the U.S. rather than being able to focus on foreign policy, which would damage Russia's interests. This also should give President Putin more room for maneuver in the run-up to Russia's own presidential election in 2018. 3. Ivanov reported that although the Kremlin had underestimated the strength of U.S. media and liberal reaction to the DNC hack and Trump's links to Russia, Putin was generally satisfied with the progress of the anti-Clinton operation to date. He recently had a drink with Putin to mark this. In Ivanov's view, the U.S. had tried to divide the Russian elite with sanctions but failed, whilst they, by contrast, had succeeded in splitting the U.S. hawks inimical to Russia and the Washington elite in more generally, half of whom had refused to endorse any presidential candidate as a result of Russian intervention. 4. Speaking separately, also in early August 2016, a Kremlin official involved in U.S. relations commented on aspects of the Russian operation to date. Its goals had been threefold: asking sympathetic U.S. actors how Moscow could help them, gathering relevant intelligence, and creating and disseminating compromising information. Compromat. This had involved the Kremlin supporting various U.S. political figures, including funding indirectly their recent visits to Moscow. He named a delegation from Lyndon Rouche, presidential candidate Jill Stein of the Green Party, Trump foreign policy advisor. 19. Carter Page, and former DIA director Michael Flynn, in this regard and as successful in terms of perceived outcomes. 10 August 2016. Company Intelligence Report 2016 100 seconds. Russia, U.S. presidential election, reaction in Trump camp to recent negative publicity about Russian interference and likely resulting tactics going forward. Summary. Trump campaign insider reports recent DNC email leaks were aimed at switching Sanders' protest voters away from Clinton and over to Trump. Admit Republican campaign underestimated resulting negative reaction from U.S. liberals, elite and media, and forced to change course as result. Need now to turn tables on Clinton's use of Putin as bogeyman in election, although some resentment at Russian president's perceived attempt to undermine USG system over and above swinging president's election. Detail. 1. Speaking in confidence on 9 August 2016, an ethnic Russian associate of Republican U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump discussed the reaction inside his camp, and revised tactics therein resulting from recent negative publicity concerning Moscow's clandestine involvement in the campaign. Trump's associate reported that the AIM via KNG the DNC ma IIS to WikiLeaks during the Democratic convention had been to SWING supporters of Bernie Sanders away from Hillary Clinton and across to Trump. These voters were perceived as activist and anti-status quo and anti-establishment, and in that regard sharing many features with the Trump campaign, including a visceral dislike of Hillary Clinton. This objective had been conceived and promoted inter alia by Trump's foreign policy advisor Carter Page, who had discussed it directly with the ethnic Russian associate. 2. Continuing on this theme, the ethnic Russian associate of Trump assessed that the problem was that the Trump campaign had underestimated the strength of the negative reaction from liberals and especially the conservative elite to Russian interference. This was forcing a rethink and a likely change of tactics. The main objective in the short term was to check Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton's successful exploitation of the Putin as bogeyman Russian interference story to tarnish Trump and bolster her own patriotic credentials. The Trump campaign was focusing and tapping into support in the American television media to achieve this, as they reckoned this resource had been underused by them to date. 3. However, Trump's associate also admitted that there was a fair amount of anger and resentment within the Republican candidate's team at what was perceived by Putin as going beyond the objective of weakening Clinton and bolstering Trump by attempting to exploit the situation to undermine the U.S. government and democratic system more generally. It was unclear at present how this aspect of the situation would play out in the weeks to come. The 10th of August 2016. Company Intelligence Report 2016 136. Russia, U.S. presidential election. Further details of Trump lawyer Cohen secret liaison with the Kremlin. Summary. Kremlin insider reports Trump lawyer Cohen secret meeting as with Kremlin officials in August 2016 was held in Prague. Russian parastatal organization Rosotronichestvo used as cover for this liaison, and premises in Czech capital may have been used for the meeting. Pro-Putin leading Duma figure Kosachev reportedly involved as plausibly deniable facilitator and may have participated in the August meeting, as with Cohen. Detail. 1. Speaking to a compatriot and friend on 19 October 2016, a Kremlin insider provided further details of reported clandestine meeting between Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump's lawyer Michael Cohen and Kremlin representatives in August 2016. Although the communication between them had to be cryptic for security reasons, the Kremlin insider clearly indicated to her friend that the reported contact took place in Prague, Czech Republic. 2. Continuing on this theme, the Kremlin insider highlighted the importance of the Russian parastatal organization Rosotronichestvo in this contact between Trump campaign representatives and Kremlin officials. Rosotronichestvo was being used as cover for this relationship, and its office in Prague may well have been used to host the Cohen Russian presidential administration (PA) meeting. It was considered a plausibly deniable vehicle for this, whilst remaining entirely under Kremlin control. 3. The Kremlin insider went on to identify leading pro-Putin Duma figure Konstantin Kosachev, head of the Foreign Relations Committee, as an important figure in the Trump campaign Kremlin liaison operation. Kosachev, also plausibly deniable being part of the Russian legislature rather than executive, had facilitated the contact in Prague and by implication may have attended the meeting, as with Cohen there in August. Company comment. We reported previously, in our Company Intelligence Report 2016 135 of the 19th of October 2016 from the same source, that Cohen met officials from the PA legal department clandestinely in an EU country in August 2016. This was in order to clean up the mess left behind by Western media. Revelations of Trump ex-campaign manager Manafort's corrupt relationship with the former pro-Russian Yanukovych regime in Ukraine and Trump foreign policy advisor Carter Page's secret meetings in Moscow with senior regime figures in July 2016. According to the Kremlin advisor. These meetings were originally scheduled for Cohen in Moscow but shifted to what was considered an operationally soft EU country when it was judged too compromising for him to travel to the Russian capital. The 20th of October 2016. Company Intelligence Report 2016 105. Russia, Ukraine, the demise of Trump's campaign manager Paul Manafort. Summary. Ex-Ukrainian President Yanukovych confides directly to Putin that he authorized kickback payments to Manafort, as alleged in Western media. Assures Russian president. However, there is no documentary evidence trail. Putin and Russian leadership remain worried, however, and skeptical that Yanukovych has fully covered the traces of these payments to Trump's former campaign manager. Close associate of Trump explains reasoning behind Manafort's recent resignation. Ukraine revelations played part, but others wanted Manafort out for various reasons, especially Lewandowsk, who remains influential. Detail. 1. Speaking in late August 2016, in the immediate aftermath of Paul Manafort's resignation as campaign manager for U.S. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump, a well-placed Russian figure reported on a recent meeting between President Putin and ex-President Yanukovych of Ukraine. This had been held in secret on the 15th of August near Volgograd, Russia, and the Western media revelations about Manafort and Ukraine had featured prominently on the agenda. Yanukovych had confided in Putin that he did authorize and order substantial kickback payments to Manafort, is alleged, but sought to reassure him that there was no documentary trail left behind which could provide clear evidence of this. 2. Given Yanukovych's unimpressive record in covering up his own corrupt tracks in the past, Putin and others in the Russian leadership were skeptical about the ex-Ukrainian president's reassurances on this as relating to Manafort. They therefore still feared the scandal had legs, especially as Manafort had been commercially active in Ukraine right up to the time, in March 2016, when he joined Trump's campaign team. For them it therefore remained a point of potential political vulnerability and embarrassment. 3. Speaking separately, also in late August 2016, an American political figure associated with Donald Trump and his campaign outlined the reasons behind Manafort's recent demise. He said it was true that the Ukraine corruption revelations had played a part in this, but also several senior players close to Trump had wanted Manafort out, primarily to loosen his control on strategy and policy formulation. Of particular importance in this regard was Manafort's predecessor as campaign manager, Lewandowski, who hated Manafort personally and remained close to Trump, with whom he discussed the presidential campaign on a regular basis. The 22nd of August 2016. Company Intelligence Report 2016 111. Russia, U.S. Kremlin fallout from media exposure of Moscow's interference in the U.S. presidential campaign. Summary. Kremlin orders senior staff to remain silent in media and private on allegations of Russian interference in U.S. presidential campaign. Senior figure, however, confirmed gist of allegations and repoke Ivanov, sacked as head of administration on account of giving Putin poor advice on issue. Vino selected as his replacement partly because he was involved in pro-Trump, anti-Clinton Operation S. Russians do have further compromat on Clinton emails and considering disseminating it after Duma legislative elections in September. Presidential spokesman Peskov continues to lead on this. However, equally important is Kremlin objective to shift policy consensus favorably to Russia in U.S. post-Obama, whoever wins. Both presidential candidates' opposition to TPP and TTIP viewed as a result in this respect. Senior Russian diplomat withdrawn from Washington embassy on account of potential exposure in U.S. presidential election operations. Detail 1. Speaking in confidence to a trusted compatriot in mid-September 2016, a senior member of the Russian presidential administration (PA) commented on the political fallout from recent Western media revelations about Moscow's intervention in favor of Donald Trump and against Hillary Clinton in the U.S. presidential election. The PA official reported that the issue had become incredibly sensitive and that President Putin had issued direct orders that Kremlin and government insiders should not discuss it in public or even in private. 2. Despite this, the PA official confirmed from direct knowledge that the gist of the allegations was true. Putin had been receiving conflicting advice on interfering from 3 separate and expert groups. On one side had been the Russian ambassador to the U.S., Sergei K1SLYK, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, together with an independent and informal network run by presidential foreign policy advisor Yuri Ushakov. KISLYK's predecessor in Washington, who had urged caution on the potential negative impact on Russia from the operation. On the other side was former PA head Sergei Ivanov, backed by Russian foreign intelligence SVR, who had advised Putin that the pro-Trump, anti-Clinton Operation would be both effective and plausibly deniable, with little blowback. The first group had been proven right, and this had been the catalyst in Putin's decision to sack Ivanov unexpectedly as PA head in August. His successor Anton Vino had been selected for the job partly because he had not been involved in the U.S. presidential election operation. 3. Continuing on this theme, the senior PA official said the situation now was that the Kremlin had further compromised on candidate Clinton and had been considering releasing this via plausibly deniable channels. After the Duma legislative elections were out of the way in mid-September, there was, however, a growing train of thought and associated lobby arguing that the Russians could still make candidate Clinton look weak and stupid by provoking her into railing against Putin and Russia without the need to release more of her emails. Presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov remained a key figure in the operation, although any final decision on dissemination of further material would be taken by Putin himself. 4. The senior PA official also reported that a growing element in Moscow's intervention in the U.S. presidential election campaign was the objective of shifting the U.S. political consensus in Russia's perceived interests, regardless of who won. It basically comprised of pushing candidate Clinton away from President Obama's policies. The best example of this was that both candidates now openly opposed the draft trade agreements TPP and TTIP, which were assessed by Moscow as detrimental to Russian interests. Other issues where the Kremlin was looking to shift the U.S. policy consensus were Ukraine and Syria. Overall, however, the presidential election was considered still to be too close to call. 5. Finally, speaking separately to the same compatriot, a senior Russian MFA official reported that as a prophylactic measure, a leading Russian diplomat, Mikhail Kulagin, had been withdrawn from Washington at short notice because Moscow feared his heavy involvement in the U.S. presidential election operation, including the so-called veterans' pensions ruse reported previously, would be exposed in the media there. His Replacement Andre Bondarev, however, was clean in this regard. Company comment. The substance of what was reported by the senior Russian PA official in Paris 1 and 2 above, including the reasons for Sergei Ivanov's dismissal, was corroborated independently by a former top-level Russian intelligence officer and Kremlin insider, also in mid-September. The 14th of September 2016. Company Intelligence Report 2016 112. Russia, U.S. presidential election, Kremlin Alpha Group CEO. Operation. Summary. Top-level Russian official confirms current closeness of Alpha Group. PUT-1N relationship. Significant favors continue to be done in both directions and FRIDMAN, and even still giving informal advice to Putin, especially on the U.S. key intermediary in Putin-Alpha relationship identified as Oleg Govorun, currently head of a presidential administration department. But throughout the 1990s, the Alpha executive who delivered illicit cash directly to Putin. Putin personally unbothered about Alpha's current lack of investment in Russia, but under pressure from colleagues over this and able to exploit it as lever over Alpha interlocutors. Detail. 1. Speaking to a trusted compatriot in mid-September 2016, a top-level Russian government official commented on the history and current state of relations between President Putin and the Alpha Group of businesses led by oligarchs Mikhail Fridman, Petr Avin and German Khan. The Russian government figure reported that although they had had their ups and downs, the leading figures in Alpha currently were on very good terms with Putin. Significant favors continued to be done in both directions, primarily political ones for Putin and business, legal ones for Alpha. Also, FRIDMAN and Avin continued to give informal advice to Putin on foreign policy, and especially about the US, where he distrusted advice being given to him by officials. 2. Although FRIDMAN recently had met directly with Putin in Russia, much of the dialogue and business between them was mediated through a senior presidential administration official, Oleg Govorun, who currently headed the department therein responsible for social cooperation with the CIS. Govorun was trusted by Putin and recently had accompanied him to Uzbekistan to pay respects at the tomb of former President Karimov. However, according to the top-level Russian government official, during the 1990s Govorun had been head of government relations at Alpha Group and in reality the driver and bag carrier used by FRIDMAN and Avin to deliver large amounts of illicit cash to the Russian president, at that time deputy mayor of St. Petersburg. Given that, and the continuing sensitivity of the Putin-Alpha relationship and need for plausible deniability, much of the contact between them was now indirect and entrusted to the relatively low-profile Govorun. 3. The top-level Russian government official described the Putin-Alpha relationship as both carrot and stick. Alpha held compromat on Putin and his corrupt business activities from the 1990s, whilst, although not personally overly bothered by Alpha's failure to reinvest the proceeds of its DNK oil company sale into the Russian economy since the Russian president was able to use pressure on this count from senior Kremlin colleagues as a lever on FRIDMAN and Avin to make them do his political bidding. The 14th of September 2016. Company Intelligence Report 2016 113. Russia, U.S. presidential election, Republican candidate Trump's prior activities in St. Petersburg. Summary. 2 knowledgeable St. Petersburg sources claim Republican candidate Trump has paid bribes and engaged in sexual activities there, but key witness silenced and evidence hard to obtain. Both believe Azari business associate of Trump, Arazagalarov, will know the details. Detail 1. Speaking to a trusted compatriot in September 2016, two well-placed sources based in St. Petersburg, one in the political, business elite and the other involved in the local services and tourist industry, commented on Republican U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump's prior activities in the city. 2. Both knew Trump had visited St. Petersburg on several occasions in the past and had been interested in doing business deals there involving real estate. The local business, political elite figure reported that Trump had paid bribes there to further his interests, but very discreetly and only through affiliated companies, making it very hard to prove. The local services industry source reported that Trump had participated in sex parties in the city too, but that all direct witnesses to this recently had been silenced, i.e., bribed or coerced to disappear. 3. The two St. Petersburg figures cited believed an Azari business figure, Arazagalarov, with offices in Baku and London, had been closely involved with Trump in Russia and would know most of the details of what the Republican presidential candidate had got up to there. 14 September 2016. Company Intelligence Report 2016 130th. Russia, Kremlin assessment of Trump and Russian interference in U.S. presidential election. Summary. Buyer's remorse sets in with Kremlin over Trump support operation in U.S. presidential election. Russian leadership disappointed that leaked emails on Clinton have not had greater impact in campaign. Russians have injected further anti-Clinton material into IG, plausibly deniable leaks pipeline, which will continue to surface hot-best material already in public domain. Putin angry with senior officials who overpromised one on Trump and Leatherheads likely to roll as result. Foreign Minister Lavrov may be next. Trump supported by Kremlin because seen as divisive, anti-establishment candidate who would shake up current international status quo in Russia's favor. Led on Trump operation. Moved from foreign ministry to FSB and then to presidential administration where it now sits. Detail 1. Speaking separately in confidence to a trusted compatriot in early October 2016, a senior Russian leadership figure and a foreign ministry official reported on recent developments concern the Kremlin's operation to support Republican candidate Donald Trump in the U.S. presidential election. The senior leadership figure said that a degree of buyer's remorse was setting in among Russian leaders concerning Trump. Putin and his colleagues were surprised and disappointed that leaks of Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton's hacked emails had not had greater impact on the campaign. 2. Continuing on this theme, the senior leadership figure commented that a stream of further hacked Clinton material already had been injected by the Kremlin into compliant Western media outlets like WikiLeaks, which remained at least plausibly deniable so the stream of these would continue through October and up to the election. However, he understood that the best material the Russians had already was out and there were no real game changes to come. 3. The Russian Foreign Ministry official, who had direct access to the Trump support operation, reported that Putin was angry at his subordinates over-promising on the Republican presidential candidate, both in terms of HTS chances and reliability, and being able to cover anchor contained the U.S. backlash over Kremlin interference. More heads, therefore, were likely to roll, with the MFA the easiest target. Ironically, despite his consistent urging of caution on the issue, Foreign Minister Lavrov could be the next one to go. 4. Asked to explain why Putin and the Kremlin had launched such an aggressive Trump support operation in the first place. The MFA official said that Russia needed to upset the liberal international status quo, including on Ukraine-related sanctions, which was seriously disadvantaging the country. Trump was viewed as divisive in disrupting the whole U.S. political system, anti-establishment, and a pragmatist with whom they could do business. As the Trump support operation had gained momentum, control of it had passed from the MHA to the FSB, and then into the presidential administration, where it remained, a reflection of its growing significance over time. There was still a view in the Kremlin that Trump would continue as a divisive political force even if he lost the presidency and may run for and be elected to another public office. The 12th of October 2016. Company Intelligence Report 2016 134th. Russia, U.S. presidential election. Further details of Kremlin liaison with Trump campaign. Summary. Close associate of SECHIN confirms his secret meeting in Moscow with Carter Face in July. Substance included offer of large stake in Rosneft in return for lifting sanctions on Russia. Pace confirms this is Trump's intention. SECHIN continued to think Trump could win presidency up to the 17th of October, now looking to reorientate his engagement with the U.S. Kremlin insider highlights importance of Trump's lawyer, Michael Cohen, and covert relationship with Russia. Cohen's wife is of Russian descent and her father a leading property developer in Moscow. Detail. T speaking to a trusted compatriot in mid-October 2016, a DOS associate of Rosneft president and Putin ally Igor SECHIN elaborated on the reported secret meeting between the Tatar and Carter Page of LTS Republican presidential candidate's foreign policy team in Moscow in July 2016. The secret meeting had been confirmed to him, her, by a senior member of SECHIN's staff, in addition to by the Rosneft president himself. It took place on either 7 or the 8th of July, the same day or the one after Carter Page made a public speech to the higher economics school in Moscow. 2. In terms of the substance of the discussion, SECHIN's associate said that the Rosneft president was so keen to lift personal and corporate Western sanctions imposed on the company that he offered Page, Trump's associates, the brokerage of up to a 19% privatized stake in Rosneft in return. Page had expressed interest and confirmed that were Trump elected U.S. president, then sanctions on Russia would be lifted. 3. According to SECHIN's DOS associate, the Rosneft president had continued to believe that Trump could win the U.S. presidency right up to the 17th of October, when he assessed this was no longer possible. SECHIN was keen to readapt accordingly and put feelers out to other business and political contacts in the U.S. instead. 4. Speaking separately to the same compatriot in mid-October 2016, a Kremlin insider with direct access to the leadership confirmed that a key role in the secret Trump campaign, Kremlin relations hip, was being played by the Republican candidate's personal lawyer Michael. Source comment. 5. SECHIN's associate opined that although Page had not stated it explicitly to SECHIN, he had dearly implied that in terms of his comment on Trump's intention to lift Russian sanctions if elected president, he was speaking with the Republican candidate's authority. Company comment. The 18th of October 2016. Company Intelligence Report 2016 135th. Russia, U.S. presidential election, the important role of Trump. Lawyer, Cohen and campaign secret liaison with the Kremlin. Summary. Kremlin insider outlines important role played by Trump's lawyer, Cohen in secret liaison with Russian leadership. Cohen engaged with Russians in trying to cover up scandal of MANAFORT and exposure of Page and meets Kremlin officials secretly in the EU in August in pursuit of this goal. These secret contacts continue but are now farmed out to trusted agents in Kremlin-linked institutes so as to remain plausibly deniable for Russian regime. Further confirmation that sacking of Ivanov and appointments of the A1NO and KIR1YENKO linked to need to cover up Kremlin's Trump support. Operation. Detail. 1. Speaking in confidence to a long-standing compatriot friend in mid-October 2016, a Kremlin insider highlighted the importance of Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump's lawyer, Michael Cohen, in the ongoing secret liaison relationship between the New York tycoon's campaign and the Russian leadership. Cohen's role had grown following the departure of Paul Manafort as Trump's campaign manager in August 2016. Prior to that, Manafort had led for the Trump side. 2. According to the Kremlin insider, Cohen now was heavily engaged in a cover-up and damage limitation operation in the attempt to prevent the full details of Trump's relationship with Russia being exposed. In pursuit of this aim, Cohen had met secretly with several Russian presidential administration (PA) legal department officials in an EU country in August 2016. The immediate issues had been to contain further scandals involving Manafort's commercial and political role in Russia, Ukraine, and to limit the damage arising from exposure of former Trump foreign policy advisor Carter Page's secret meetings with Russian leadership figures in Moscow the previous month. The overall objective had been to sweep it all under the carpet and make sure no connections could be fully established or proven. 3. Things had become even hotter since August on the Trump-Russia track. According to the Kremlin insider, this had meant that direct contact between the Trump team and Russia had been farmed out by the Kremlin to trusted agents of influence working in pro-government policy institutes like that of law and comparative jurisprudence. Cohen, however, continued to lead for the Trump team. 4. Referring back to the surprise sacking of Sergei Ivanov as head of PA in August 2016, his replacement by Anton Vino and the appointment of former Russian Premier Sergei Kiryenko to another senior position in the PA, the Kremlin insider repeated that this had been directly connected to the Trump support operation and the need to cover up now that it was being exposed by the USG and in the Western media. Company comment. The Kremlin insider was unsure of the identities of the PA officials with whom Cohen met secretly in August, or the exact dates and locations of the meetings. There were significant internal security barriers being erected in the PA as the Trump issue became more controversial and damaging. However, he continued to try to obtain these. The 19th of October 2016. Company Intelligence Report 2016-166. US-Russia. Further details of secret dialogue between Trump campaign team, Kremlin and associated hackers in Prague. Summary. Trump's representative Cohen accompanied to Prague in August-September 2016 by 3 colleagues for secret discussions with Kremlin representatives and associated operators, hackers. Agenda included how to process deniable cash payments to operatives, contingency plans for covering up operations, and action in event of a Clinton election victory. Some further details of Russian representatives, operatives involved. Romanian hackers employed, and use of Bulgaria as told to lie low. Anti-Clinton hackers and other operatives paid by both Trump team. and Kremlin, but with ultimate loyalty to head of PA Ivanov and his successor S. Detail 1. We reported previously 2016 135th and 136 on secret meeting S held in Prague, Czech Republic in August 2016 between then Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump's representative Michael Cohen and his interlocutors from the Kremlin working under cover of Russian NGO Rosotronichestvo CLNTON Democratic Party operations. Cohen had been accompanied to Prague by 3 colleagues, and the timing of the visit was either in the last week of August or the first week of September. One of their main Russian interlocutors was Oleg Solodukhin, operating under Rosotronichestvo cover. According the agenda, comprised questions on how deniable cash payments were to be made to hackers who had worked in Europe under Kremlin direction against the Clinton campaign, and various contingencies for covering up these operations, and Moscow's secret liaison with the Trump team more generally provided further details of these meetings and associated anti 3. Ava RHE period Marsa September 2016. CMPAN alt and its affiliates had been using botnets and pawn traffic to transmit viruses, plant bugs, steal data and conduct altering operations Gamsuhe Democratic Party leadership entities linked to involved and Mother Hack expert, both recruited under duress by the FSB H. M were significant players in this operation. In Prague, Cohen agreed contingency plans for various scenarios to protect the operation, but in particular what was to be done in the event that Hillary Clinton won the presidency. It was important in this event that cash payments owed were made quickly and discreetly, and that SAR and other operators were stood down to go effectively to ground to cover the traces. We reported earlier that the involvement of political operatives Paul Manafort and Carter Page in the secret Trump Kremlin liaison had been exposed in the media in the run-up to Prague, and that damage limitation of these also was discussed by Cohen with the Kremlin representatives. 4. In terms of practical measures to be taken, it was agreed by the two sides in Prague to stand down various Romanian hackers, presumably based in their homeland or neighboring Eastern Europe, and that other operatives should head for a bolt hole in Plovdiv, Bulgaria, where they should lay low on payments. Ivanov's associate said that the operatives involved had been paid by both Trump's team and the Kremlin, though their orders and ultimate loyalty lay with Ivanov as head of the PA and thus ultimately responsible for the operation, and his designated successor after he was dismissed by President Putin in connection with the anti-Clinton operation in mid-August. 13 December 2016. EECH will read it out loud for you. You can also drag files to here and edit the text. Go ahead.